The golden chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel sparkled above the crowd of Manhattan's elite. Laughter mixed with the soft hum of jazz, crystal glasses clinked, and the scent of expensive perfume floated in the air. Emily Carter stood quietly near the marble pillar, cradling her 1-year-old son, Noah, against her shoulder. Her husband, Nathan Blake, was across the room, handsome, confident, the center of attention in his tailored navy Armani suit. But Emily's eyes didn't see charm tonight. They saw distance. They saw danger. Nathan leaned close to a woman in a red silk dress, Ava Monroe, his company's PR director. Ava whispered something in his ear, her manicured fingers brushing his cuff. Nathan laughed, the kind of laugh he used to give Emily years ago. Emily's heart sank. She turned, holding Noah tighter, whispering, "It's okay, baby." Her wedding ring glimmered under the chandeliers, a silent witness to what was about to shatter. When Nathan saw her walking toward him, his jaw tightened. "Emily, not now," he muttered, setting his Macallan on the glass table. "Not now?" she said softly. "I've been calling you all day. You said this was a business event, but she's here, again." Ava smirked. "Maybe you should rest, Emily. Pregnancy hormones can make women." Before she could finish, Emily's voice cracked. "I'm 6 months pregnant, Nathan. Your son is right here, and you're—" "Enough," Nathan snapped. His voice echoed off the marble. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. The band froze mid-note. Emily's breath hitched as Nathan's hand flew across her face. The sound of the slap cracked through the hall like breaking glass. Noah began to cry, his small voice piercing through the silence. Emily staggered back, clutching her cheek, eyes wide in disbelief. Her iPhone slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a hollow clatter. The chandelier's golden light seemed to flicker, bending time. Ava gasped dramatically, pretending surprise, but a faint smirk lingered on her lips. Around them, dozens of guests stared, frozen between curiosity and horror. Someone whispered, "Did he just?" Emily's lips trembled. "You hit me. In front of our son." Nathan's face was pale now, but his pride didn't let him retreat. "You embarrassed me in front of clients." "What did you expect?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I expected you to be a man." Tears blurred her vision, but she stood tall, trembling and fierce. The baby in her arms whimpered, and she kissed his forehead, whispering, "It's okay, Noah. Mommy's here." No one dared to move. The hotel manager approached hesitantly, but before he could speak, the doors at the end of the hall swung open. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped in, silver hair, calm fury in his eyes. It was Richard Carter, Emily's father. He walked through the silence like a storm disguised in silk. Every guest instinctively stepped aside. His Mont Blanc pen gleamed from his breast pocket, a small symbol of quiet authority. "Mr. Blake," Richard's voice was low but powerful, carrying across the hall. "Come with me, now." Nathan froze. Ava's face turned pale. She knew who Richard Carter was, the CEO of Blake and Carter Holdings. The very man who had made Nathan's career possible. Emily stood still, shaking, holding her baby, tears streaking her makeup. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The entire room had seen the truth. Richard turned to the stunned crowd and said, "This event is over." He placed a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. Outside, the Manhattan night glittered coldly against the glass doors. Emily's reflection looked back at her, broken but breathing. As the elevator doors closed, Richard whispered, "He just ended his career." And in that moment, Emily didn't know that this slap, the humiliation, the pain would become the beginning of her rise. The small conference room beside the Plaza's ballroom was meant for private deals and billion-dollar handshakes. Tonight, it felt like a courtroom. The city lights from Fifth Avenue spilled through the tall windows, catching the sharp edge of Richard Carter's jaw as he shut the door behind him. The click of the lock echoed like a verdict. Nathan stood by the table, his once proud posture crumbling. The sound of jazz from the ballroom was muffled now, replaced by the hum of humiliation. He adjusted his cufflinks, trying to recover his composure. "Richard, let's not make this bigger than it is." Richard's eyes didn't blink. "You hit my daughter." Nathan laughed nervously. You saw how emotional she was. She accused me in public. She's 6 months pregnant, Nathan, Richard interrupted, his voice quiet but cutting. And you hit her while holding my grandson. In the plaza. Surrounded by your colleagues. Tell me, what kind of man does that? Nathan swallowed hard. It was a mistake. I lost my temper. You know how stressful this Park Avenue merger has been. I've been sleeping 4 hours a night. Richard leaned forward, placing his Mont Blanc pen on the table like a weapon. Do not insult me with excuses. I've built men like you, and I've broken them. I know what arrogance looks like when it tries to hide behind pressure. Nathan's jaw clenched. You wouldn't destroy your own son-in-law. Think about Emily, about Noah. I am thinking about them, Richard said, his tone ice cold. That's why you're done. He pulled an envelope from his suit pocket and placed it in front of Nathan. Inside were the documents for suspension, effective immediately. You are relieved of all duties as vice president until further notice. Your access badge will be disabled by 9 a.m. Return your company-issued MacBook Pro and keycard before then. Security will escort you out, if necessary. Nathan's eyes widened. You can't just suspend me like that. Richard straightened his tie. I can. I'm your CEO. A moment of silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Outside, the muted sounds of the city pulsed through the glass-honking cabs. Laughter, life. Inside, Nathan's empire was collapsing brick by brick. He looked at Richard, trying to find some trace of mercy. This is between me and Emily. Don't ruin my career over one mistake. Richard's expression softened for the first time. It's not one mistake, Nathan. It's a revelation. You didn't just hit my daughter, you showed me who you really are. Nathan looked away, jaw trembling. You're making a mistake too. If this gets out, it'll destroy the company's image. Richard nodded slowly. You should have thought about that before raising your hand to a woman carrying your child. The door creaked open slightly. Grace, Emily's best friend, stood there holding Noah. The baby's soft cry filled the tension. Emily sat nearby, pale but composed, pressing an ice pack against her cheek. Grace whispered, "He's okay. Just scared." Richard turned to her. "Take them to the car. I'll handle the rest." Nathan's voice cracked. "Please, Richard, don't do this here." Richard gave him one last look, a gaze that carried both pity and power. "You'll learn, Nathan. Some debts can't be paid with money. They're paid in reputation. And tonight, you've just bankrupted yourself." He walked out, leaving Nathan alone in the glow of the city lights. The envelope sat untouched on the table, beside a half-empty glass of scotch. Nathan picked it up, his fingers shaking. From the hallway, he could hear the elevator doors close, the sound of his old life leaving without him. Outside, Emily stepped into the cold November air. Grace wrapped a coat around her shoulders, and the driver opened the door of the Mercedes. Richard joined them moments later, silent, staring out at the Manhattan skyline glittering above Central Park. In that silence, Emily whispered, "Dad, what happens now?" Richard's eyes stayed on the city. "Now, sweetheart, he learns what losing everything feels like." And as the car pulled away from the plaza, Nathan remained behind alone in a room full of power that no longer belonged to him. The Mercedes glided silently through the cold Manhattan night. Outside, the city sparkled the plaza, fading behind them like a ghost in gold. Inside, the air was thick with unspoken things. Emily sat in the back seat, her face turned toward the window, watching the lights of Central Park blur through her tears. Noah slept against her shoulder, his small breaths steady, unaware of the chaos that had just shattered their world. Grace sat beside her, holding Emily's hand. "You need to breathe," she said softly. "Slowly, in and out." Emily nodded, but her chest still burned. Her cheek throbbed. The echo of the slap was still there, like it had been imprinted inside her skull. She closed her eyes and heard it again. The music stopping, the whispers, the shame. Richard sat in the front, silent. His phone buzzed constantly, texts from board members, journalists, and friends who had seen something online already. He typed only one reply. No comment. When they reached the emergency clinic on 5th and 58th, Grace helped Emily out. The night air bit into her skin. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, examined her cheek, her belly, her vitals. "You and the baby are stable," she said gently. "Just rest. Avoid stress." Stress. Emily almost laughed at that. Richard handled the paperwork, flashing his insurance card. The nurse whispered, "Is that the Richard Carter?" But Emily didn't care about names anymore. Her world had narrowed to her son's heartbeat and her own shaky breathing. Back in the car, Grace handed Emily a tissue. "You can't go home tonight." "I have to get Noah's things," Emily murmured. "We'll get them later. Dad's arranging another place." Richard turned slightly. "You'll stay in Brooklyn Heights for now. It's quiet, secure. I'll send a car for your essentials." Emily hesitated. "I don't want to run away." "You're not running," Richard said. "You're regrouping." They drove across the bridge, the Manhattan skyline glowing behind them like another universe. When they arrived, the apartment waiting for her was warm, modern, overlooking the East River. It smelled of cedar and lavender. Emily stepped inside, feeling like a stranger in her own life. On the kitchen counter sat a brown Amazon box. Richard gestured toward it. "It's just something I ordered for you last week. Thought you might like it." Inside was a copy of Atomic Habits. She smiled weakly. "Exactly," he said, managing a faint smile. After he left, Grace tucked Noah into the crib, then turned to Emily. "You should call Linda Park tomorrow. She's good family law, protective orders, all of it." Emily nodded. "I don't want to fight him. I just want to be safe." Grace's voice softened. "That's not weakness. That's survival." When Grace finally left, the apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the city through the windows. Emily sat on the couch, holding the book in her lap. Her phone buzzed 10 missed calls from Nathan, then a text. "You ruined everything. Answer me." She turned the phone face down and let it buzz until it stopped. She opened the voice memo app. Her hands trembled, but she pressed record. "This is Emily Carter. Tonight, at the Plaza Hotel, Nathan Blake hit me in front of our child. I need to remember this moment, not to hate, but to never forget what it felt like." Her voice cracked. "This is day one." She ended the recording and set the phone beside her. Outside, the lights of Manhattan shimmered across the water like distant fireflies. Somewhere out there, Nathan was probably panicking, making calls, spinning lies. But none of that mattered tonight. She leaned back, closing her eyes, feeling Noah's warmth against her. The city could roar, the headlines could spread, but for now, there was only silence and the fragile, glowing seed of resolve inside her. And as she whispered goodnight to her sleeping son, Emily didn't yet know this was the night she stopped being afraid and started becoming unstoppable. Morning sunlight crept through the sheer curtains, brushing over Emily's tired face. She hadn't slept, only drifted in and out of shallow dreams where laughter turned into shouting. Noah stirred beside her, his tiny fingers curling around the fabric of her robe. For the first time, she was waking up not in her luxury penthouse overlooking Central Park, but in a quiet apartment in Brooklyn Heights, peaceful, safe, and painfully unfamiliar. Her father had already left for the office, leaving a note on the kitchen counter written in his steady, elegant handwriting. "Doctor at 10 a.m. I'll meet you there. Love, Dad." She read it twice, tracing the word love with her thumb. Somehow, that single word made her throat tighten. By 10, Emily was sitting in a bright, sterile clinic on Atlantic Avenue. Grace had come along, keeping Noah entertained with her keys. The doctor, a calm man with silver glasses, reviewed her results. "The baby's heartbeat is strong," he said gently. "You've been through a shock, but your vitals are normal. Rest and emotional support will be important." Emily nodded. Her fingers fidgeted in her lap. "Can stress affect the baby long-term?" He smiled softly. "Stress happens. What matters is how you handle it. You're here. You're doing what's right. That's strength." Outside the clinic, Richard waited beside his Mercedes, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in his measured CEO tone. "Yes, HR will coordinate his suspension. No, he won't have access to the building. Keep it quiet for now. When he saw Emily, he ended the call immediately. Everything all right? She gave a faint nod. The baby's fine. He exhaled, relief washing over his face. That's all that matters. They drove back in silence. Manhattan shimmered across the river, but Emily didn't look back. Her phone buzzed again, Nathan's name on the screen. She turned it off completely. When they reached the apartment, Richard placed a small envelope on the dining table. That's the contact information for Linda Park, he said. She's one of the best family attorneys in the city. You should talk to her today. Emily frowned. Dad, I don't want to turn this into a war. He shook his head slowly. This isn't war. It's protection. For you, for Noah. There's a line between forgiveness and foolishness. Later that afternoon, she called Linda. The woman's voice was calm, steady, professional. Emily, I'm sorry you're going through this, she said. First step is documentation, any photos, messages, witnesses. You were at the plaza, correct? They'll have security footage. Emily blinked. There were cameras? Everywhere, Linda replied. Don't worry, I'll handle the request. You just focus on staying safe. When the call ended, Emily felt something shift. For the first time in 24 hours, she wasn't just reacting, she was preparing. As evening fell, Grace stopped by with dinner and a small white box. A gift, she said. Inside was a baby blue journal with "One day at a time" embossed on the cover. Write everything down, Grace added. It'll keep you sane. Emily smiled faintly. You sound like a therapist. Grace laughed. I'm a best friend with Pinterest. They ate quietly as Noah babbled in his high chair. Every now and then, Emily would look at her son and think, he's why I can't fall apart. When night came, she sat by the window, watching the city lights twinkle like restless thoughts. She opened the journal and wrote, Day 2, I am safe. My child is safe. He hurt me, but he doesn't get to define me. I will not be silent. Then she closed it, feeling the faint hum of life from the city below. And somewhere across the East River, as Nathan tried to call again and again, Emily drew her first line of safety and vowed never to let him cross it again. The next morning, Brooklyn was wrapped in a quiet mist. Emily stood by the window of her temporary apartment, sipping weak coffee from a paper cup. Noah was still asleep, a soft bundle of warmth in his crib. The city beyond the glass seemed distant, detached as if it belonged to a life she had already left behind. Her cheek was healing, but the bruise beneath her skin still pulsed with memory. At 9 sharp, Richard arrived. He looked exhausted but composed, his charcoal suit perfectly pressed. Linda Park will meet us in my office, he said. She wants to start the process today. Emily hesitated, staring at her reflection. Are we really doing this? Yes, he answered simply. We're building a firewall between you and him. By 10, they were seated in a sleek conference room on Park Avenue, 27 floors above the noise of Manhattan. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline looked almost serene. Emily sat across from Linda Park, a sharp yet kind-eyed woman in her 40s. Her silver laptop glowed with open files labeled Protective Order and Custody Draft. Linda leaned forward. Emily, here's what we're going to do. First, we'll file for a temporary restraining order. That ensures Nathan can't contact or approach you or Noah. Then, we'll secure copies of the hotel's security footage. The plaza has high-definition cameras throughout the lobby and ballroom. Those recordings will support your case. Emily listened, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her water glass. He won't take this quietly, she murmured. Linda nodded. I know, but you have evidence, witnesses, and your father's backing. This isn't about revenge, it's about protection. Richard crossed his arms. What about the company's side? HR has already suspended him, but I want to make sure there's no retaliation. Linda replied smoothly. He's still under corporate policy. Any attempt to intimidate Emily or manipulate internal records will violate ethics and legal standards. We'll make that clear. Miguel Torres, Richard's financial advisor, entered the room carrying a slim folder. I've gone through Nathan's company expenses, he said. He used the corporate card at the Ritz-Carlton last month, twice. Both times, Ava Monroe signed the receipt. Linda raised an eyebrow. Perfect. That supports a pattern misuse of company funds and possible affair. Emily's breath caught, but she didn't cry. She just stared at the numbers. So, while I was home with Noah, they were at the Ritz. Richard's expression hardened, and he called it a business retreat. Linda tapped the table gently. Don't focus on anger, Emily. Focus on control. That's how you win. The rest of the meeting blurred into a checklist: affidavits, custody terms, financial security. But through the haze of legal language, Emily began to feel something she hadn't in days. Structure. A plan. A map out of chaos. By noon, the documents were signed. Linda closed her laptop. You've taken the hardest step, she said softly. From now on, we move forward, one motion at a time. Outside, the sky had cleared. The city shimmered in pale sunlight, glass towers reflecting streaks of gold. Richard placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. We'll get through this, he said. Emily smiled faintly. I believe you. As they walked out of the building, the wind carried the faint scent of roasted coffee and asphalt. For a moment, Manhattan didn't feel hostile. It felt alive, like it was watching her rebuild. That evening, Emily returned home to find a message from Linda. Temporary restraining order approved. Effective immediately. He cannot approach you or contact you directly. Emily read the words 3 times, then exhaled. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But it was protection. She picked up Noah, pressing her cheek against his hair. Mommy did something brave today, she whispered. We're safe now. And as the city lights flickered on one by one, Emily realized that justice doesn't always roar. It sometimes begins with quiet paperwork and the steady heartbeat of courage. The sun was already high over Manhattan when Nathan Blake woke up to the sound of his phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. His head throbbed, and the smell of last night's whiskey still lingered in the air. For a second, he didn't remember where he was. Then he saw the empty champagne glass, the half-open curtains, and the red silk scarf Ava had left draped across the chair. It all came rushing back. He sat up, grabbed his phone, and scrolled through the flood of notifications. Dozens of missed calls. 3 urgent emails marked internal investigation. 1 from the HR director. Effective immediately. Your corporate access has been restricted, pending review of recent conduct. Nathan swore under his breath. He threw on a wrinkled shirt and walked to the window. From his hotel suite, the Manhattan skyline glimmered like a taunt. His reflection stared back at him, a man who'd had everything and was now standing on the edge of losing it all. His phone rang again. It was Ava. He answered sharply. What the hell is going on? Her voice was light, almost mocking. Don't look at me. People are talking. Someone leaked a photo from the plaza. Nathan froze. A photo? Yes, baby, she purred. You slapping your pregnant wife. It's all over the gossip blogs. Guess that networking event turned into a PR nightmare. He felt the blood drain from his face. You promised. I promised nothing. Ava interrupted. You wanted fun, remember? Well, fun has a price. Then she hung up. Nathan stared at the phone in disbelief. He could already see it, his face, caught mid-motion, hand raised, Emily recoiling. A single image that could end careers. His stomach twisted. A knock at the door broke the silence. It was hotel security. Mr. Blake, we've been asked to inform you that your suite must be vacated by noon. He blinked. Vacated by who? Your company's corporate account has been suspended, the man replied. We'll need your key card. Nathan's throat tightened. He packed in silence, throwing clothes into a leather duffel, his movements jerky. When he opened his laptop, his company email was already locked. The login screen read, Account deactivated. By the time he reached the street, the Manhattan noise felt louder, harsher. His Mercedes wasn't there. It had been repossessed by corporate. He hailed a cab, his hands trembling. Park Avenue, he muttered. Inside the cab, his phone buzzed again. A message from Richard Carter. We will conduct a formal review. Do not attempt to contact Emily. Nathan's jaw tightened. He's turning her against me, he whispered to himself. He's taking everything, but deep down, he knew the truth. He had done this. At Park Avenue headquarters, the receptionist's expression was stiff. "Mr. Blake, HR is expecting you." He walked through the glass doors, every step heavier than the last. Inside the boardroom, Richard stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back. Linda Park sat beside him, documents stacked neatly. Richard turned slowly. "Nathan, your conduct has created a liability we cannot ignore. You are hereby suspended pending full termination. Security will escort you out." Nathan's face reddened. "You can't do this. I built this company with you." Richard's eyes were cold. "You built it beside me. Then you decided you were above it." A guard stepped forward. Nathan hesitated, then looked at Linda. "Tell Emily I'm sorry." She met his eyes, unflinching. "Tell her yourself, when the court allows it." Minutes later, Nathan walked out of the building, the November wind cutting into his face. Reporters waited near the curb, flashes exploding as he passed. He kept his head down, the sound of his own footsteps echoing like a countdown. Back at the hotel, Ava was gone. So was her scarf, her perfume, her promises. The room smelled of emptiness. Nathan sank into the chair and buried his face in his hands. The silence was deafening, and for the first time, the man who thought he owned the world realized he'd been nothing more than a tenant evicted from his own life. The afternoon light spilled over Manhattan like melted gold. Fifth Avenue was alive with the sound of traffic, perfume ads glowing from the billboards, and tourists snapping pictures near the plaza, ironically, the same place Emily's world had collapsed. But today, she wasn't the broken woman from that night. She walked with steady steps, Noah in his stroller, Grace beside her holding a paper cup of Starbucks coffee. Grace tried to sound casual. "You sure you want to do this? Going back there?" Emily nodded. "I'm not going to hide from a building. I just need my things." The court order allowed her to collect her belongings under security supervision. Linda had arranged everything. It wasn't about confrontation, it was closure. When they arrived at the glass tower apartment on Fifth Avenue, the doorman's face froze for a second, then softened. "Mrs. Blake," he said awkwardly, "I'm so sorry for everything." "Just Emily now," she replied gently. Security led them upstairs. The elevator ride felt endless, the hum of cables echoing in her chest. When the doors opened, Emily stepped into what used to be her home, a space filled with designer furniture, polished marble, and the ghost of laughter that no longer belonged there. The air smelled faintly of cologne, and Ava's perfume sweet and sharp like betrayal. Grace began packing Noah's toys while Emily walked to the bedroom. The silk duvet was perfectly arranged, but there were 2 glasses on the nightstand. She stared at them for a long moment, then opened the dresser. Inside was a small blue box, the Tiffany one Nathan had given her 2 years ago for their anniversary. Inside, the silver bracelet was missing one charm, the tiny heart that had once read forever. Emily didn't cry. She simply closed the box and slipped it into her bag. In the living room, a photographer's flash flickered through the window. Someone was outside, taking pictures. Linda had warned her that reporters might be around, hoping for a headline. Emily stepped aside, her face calm. Grace looked at her. "They want a reaction." "They won't get one," Emily said quietly. "Not anymore." When they were done, the security officer escorted them to the lobby. As the elevator doors opened, 2 familiar voices echoed down the hall. Emily froze. Nathan and Ava were there, arguing. Ava's tone was sharp, furious. "You promised you'd fix this. You said your father-in-law would calm things down." Nathan snapped. "Do you think I control Richard Carter? He owns half of this city." They turned and saw Emily. For a heartbeat, the hallway went silent. Nathan's eyes softened, guilt flashing through them. "Emily, wait please. Just talk to me." Grace stepped forward protectively. "She doesn't owe you a word." Ava folded her arms, smirking. "Oh, come on, Grace. Everyone knows this is just rich people drama. Don't act like she's some saint." Emily's voice cut through the air. "You can have him, Ava. All of him. The lies, the guilt, The empty promises, they're yours now. Ava's smirk faltered. Nathan reached out as if to touch Emily's arm, but the security guard stepped between them. Sir, the restraining order applies here. Please step back. Nathan froze, his hand trembling midair. Emily took a deep breath, her heart pounding but her posture unshaken. I'm done being afraid, Nathan. You don't get to hurt me again. Without another glance, she pushed the stroller forward. The elevator doors closed slowly, sealing the moment like a scene from a life she'd finally left behind. Outside, the city noise wrapped around her like a song she understood again. Grace handed her a fresh coffee. You didn't even shake, she said proudly. Emily smiled faintly. That's because he doesn't matter anymore. They crossed Fifth Avenue, the wind lifting her hair. The afternoon sun caught her reflection in a shop window, tired but unbroken, and as she walked away from the place that once defined her, Emily realized that freedom doesn't always begin with victory. It begins with the courage to leave without looking back. The night was cold, and rain tapped softly against the windows of the Brooklyn Heights apartment. Emily sat in the dim light of a bedside lamp, her robe wrapped tight around her, a cup of chamomile tea cooling beside her MacBook Air. Noah stirred in his crib, letting out a sleepy sigh before settling again. She closed her laptop, rubbed her swollen eyes, and looked at him, the tiny heartbeat that had kept her from falling apart. Her phone vibrated once on the nightstand. A text from Grace. Thinking of you. Proud of how you handled today. Another from Linda. Restraining order confirmed. Court date pending. Emily read them, nodded to herself, and locked her phone. The quiet that followed wasn't loneliness, it was peace, the kind that comes after the storm finally passes. Still, she couldn't shake the echo of Nathan's face when he saw her at the apartment earlier. There had been guilt there, maybe fear, but no love. Whatever they had once shared was gone. The man she'd trusted had become someone she didn't recognize. And yet, she didn't feel hate anymore. Just emptiness, slowly turning into resolve. She got up and checked on Noah. His small fingers twitched in a dream. His lips curved into the faintest smile. Emily sat beside him, whispering, "You saved me, you know that? Every time I wanted to give up, you made me breathe again." The rain picked up, whispering against the glass like a lullaby. On the nightstand lay the book her father had given her, Women Who Run with the Wolves. She opened it to a page she'd marked earlier. The doors to the world of the wild self are few but precious. If you have a deep scar, that is a door. Her eyes lingered on those words. She wasn't healed yet, but she was learning. Hours later, she turned on her Kindle, scrolling through Atomic Habits again. She underlined one line. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Emily smiled faintly. Then, I'll build better systems. The next morning, sunlight poured in through the curtains. The storm had cleared. She woke early, brewed coffee, and opened a notebook labeled Next Steps. She listed 3 things. Call therapist. Schedule prenatal checkup. Start looking for part-time work in nursing again. At 10, she joined a virtual support group for women in recovery from domestic abuse. Her voice was shaky at first. My name's Emily, she said, and I'm learning to take back my life. Dozens of faces smiled from the screen, different stories, but the same fire in their eyes. One woman said softly, "You're already stronger than you think." When the call ended, Emily felt lighter. Around noon, Grace arrived with lunch, chicken soup, and a small gift bag. Inside was a plush elephant for Noah and a note, a reminder that soft things can still survive storms. Emily hugged her friend tightly. "You've been my anchor." Grace shrugged. "We just don't let queens drown, that's all." That night, as Noah giggled in his bath, Emily realized how much had changed in just a week. The bruises on her face were fading. The panic in her chest had turned into something steadier, something like strength. Later, she sat by the window again, Noah asleep beside her, Manhattan's skyline glowing across the water. Somewhere out there, Nathan was probably spiraling deeper into his own darkness, but she no longer cared. Her focus was here on the small breaths, the warmth, the steady pulse of life. She whispered to herself, "We're going to be okay." Then she pressed record on her phone again. Day 7. I didn't cry today. I worked, I smiled, I made plans. Maybe that's what healing feels like, quiet, but real. And as the night embraced her, Emily understood that her greatest act of strength wasn't fighting Nathan. It was choosing peace for herself and her son. Morning sunlight broke through the clouds, splashing gold across the East River. Emily was in the kitchen, pouring milk into Noah's cereal bowl, when her phone buzzed on the counter. She wiped her hands, glanced at the screen, and froze. It was a message from Grace. "Don't panic." "But it's out." Emily's stomach dropped. She opened the link Grace sent. There, plastered across the front page of a gossip site, was a blurry photo from the plaza, the exact moment Nathan's hand struck her face. The flash had caught her mid-flinch, eyes wide, the baby in her arms. The headline screamed, "Millionaire CEO assaults pregnant wife at gala witnesses in shock." Her breath caught. The photo burned into her vision. Every humiliation, every whisper came flooding back. She could almost hear the gasp of the crowd again. Grace called immediately. Listen to me. Don't read the comments. The public's brutal. Linda's already on it. She's sending takedown requests." Emily swallowed hard. "They can see Noah's face," she whispered. "I know," Grace said softly. "We're getting it removed. Just hang tight." An hour later, Linda's calm voice came through the phone. "The photo will be down by tonight. I've already sent legal notices to the site and to the photographer. But, Emily, this may actually help us. The image verifies the incident beyond dispute. It's not just your word anymore." Emily leaned against the counter, her hand shaking. "I didn't want proof like this." "I know," Linda replied gently. "But sometimes the truth has a way of showing up whether we're ready or not." Meanwhile, across town, Nathan sat in his temporary apartment, staring at the same photo on his laptop. His phone was exploding board members, clients, reporters. Each message worse than the last. He threw the laptop shut, the sound echoing off the bare walls. Ava stood by the window, sipping coffee, scrolling through her phone. She raised an eyebrow. "Well, you've officially gone viral." "Congratulations." "Shut up, Ava," Nathan snapped. "You think this is funny?" She smirked. "No. I think it's inevitable. You always thought you could have it all. Now the world sees you for what you are." Nathan grabbed his jacket. "I need to fix this. I need to talk to Richard." Ava scoffed. "He's the one who leaked it, genius. Damage control isn't coming." Nathan stopped mid-step, eyes narrowing. He wouldn't, but deep down, he knew Richard didn't need to lift a finger. The truth had done the work for him. Back in Brooklyn, Emily sat with Linda and Miguel in her living room. Miguel laid down a folder filled with financial statements. "We've got it," he said. 2 transactions from Nathan's corporate account, 5-star suites at the Ritz-Carlton, both under Ava's name. There's no hiding this anymore. Emily looked at the papers, her fingers brushing the cold ink. "So, while I was pregnant and alone, he was spending company money on her." Miguel nodded. "And that makes this not just personal misconduct but corporate fraud." Linda smiled faintly, her professionalism hiding satisfaction. "That's leverage, Emily. Legal, clean, undeniable." Emily exhaled, finally feeling a strange kind of calm. "What happens next?" "We push forward," Linda said. "Protective custody order, custody motion, asset review. You stay silent and composed. Let the evidence speak." That night, when Noah was asleep, Emily opened her laptop again. The photo was gone from the site. In its place was a short statement. "Content removed at request of legal counsel." She closed her eyes in relief. Then she opened her voice recorder once more. "Day 9, she said softly. "The world saw my worst moment today. But maybe that's not the end. Maybe it's the beginning of people seeing the truth." Outside, Manhattan glittered beneath the stars, indifferent yet somehow comforting. The photo that once humiliated her had become the spark of her justice. And as the night deepened, Emily realized that sometimes the most painful evidence can also be the weapon that finally sets you free. It was a gray Monday morning on Park Avenue, the kind of morning when even the city seemed to move slower. The air inside Blake and Carter Holdings felt heavy, charged with tension. The boardroom, usually a space for billion-dollar discussions, had become the arena for a reckoning. The long glass table gleamed under recessed lights, and at its head sat Richard Carter, calm, unreadable. Nathan walked in, his suit immaculate, his eyes bloodshot. He carried a leather folder and the weight of his own downfall. Every step across the marble floor echoed like a drumbeat. The board members, men and women he used to joke with, dine with, avoided his gaze. Richard didn't look up. "You're late." Nathan forced a smile. "Traffic. Traffic doesn't explain arrogance," Richard replied coolly. The HR director, a woman named Elaine, opened her laptop. "We're here to discuss the reputational and ethical crisis involving Mr. Blake," she said. "The incident at the plaza has reached over 10 million views online. Multiple media outlets have identified Emily Carter as the victim." Nathan shifted in his seat. "It's a misunderstanding that's been blown out of proportion. Emily and I—" "Stop," Richard said sharply. "You don't get to rewrite what the world saw." Silence fell. The rain outside streaked against the glass, tracing crooked lines like the fractures in Nathan's life. Elaine clicked to a slide, showing headlines. "Millionaire CEO suspended for domestic violence allegations. Investor confidence drops 17%. Carter family under pressure to respond." Nathan swallowed. "We can manage this. Issue a statement. Blame stress from the merger." One board member, an older man named Harris, interrupted. "You think stress justifies hitting a pregnant woman?" Nathan froze. "That's not—" "It's exactly what it is," Harris said. "And if we keep you, we go down with you." A murmur of agreement spread around the table. Nathan's hand tightened around his folder. "You're all hypocrites. Every one of you has skeletons." Richard rose slowly. "Enough." His voice carried the kind of authority that ended arguments without raising volume. "This company was built on trust, Nathan. On integrity. You broke both." He placed a single paper on the table, a formal motion for termination. "You will resign today, effective immediately. It's the only chance you have to salvage what's left of your reputation." Nathan's voice cracked. "You can't do this to me." Richard's eyes softened, but only slightly. "I'm not doing this to you. You did it to yourself." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Nathan laughed bitterly. "So that's it? You're firing your own son-in-law?" Richard looked straight at him. "I'm protecting my daughter." The words hit harder than any slap. Nathan's shoulders slumped. He signed the resignation letter with shaking hands, the Mont Blanc pen Richard had once given him on his first promotion. When it was over, he stood there, staring at his signature. "Do you even care what happens to me?" Richard exhaled. "I care that you learn something from it. Because until you do, you'll keep destroying everything you touch." Nathan's voice was barely a whisper. "And Emily?" "She'll be fine," Richard said, turning away. "She's stronger than you think." Security escorted Nathan out. As he walked through the lobby, employees stopped what they were doing. Conversations hushed. Eyes followed him, not with pity, but with quiet judgment. Outside, the rain had turned to snow, soft flakes falling on the city that had once adored him. His reflection in the glass doors looked small, almost unrecognizable. Back in the boardroom, Richard sank into his chair, staring at the skyline. Elaine closed her laptop. "This will calm investors," she said softly. "Good," Richard replied. But this wasn't about investors. He picked up his phone and typed a short message to Emily. "It's done. He's out. You're safe now." Emily, sitting by the window in Brooklyn with Noah on her lap, read the message and smiled faintly. Outside, the first snow of winter dusted the rooftops like a promise of new beginnings. And as the city moved on, one truth stood tall above Park Avenue: power built on cruelty always collapses, but dignity never does. The storm outside had passed, but the one inside Nathan's chest was only beginning. 3 days after his resignation, The once celebrated millionaire sat in a half-empty apartment in Midtown, his new temporary residence, until the corporate lease expired. The marble countertops were bare, the champagne bottles gone, the laughter replaced by silence. Even Ava hadn't returned his calls. She'd vanished the moment the scandal broke. Nathan sat by the window, staring at the gray Manhattan skyline. A half-eaten sandwich sat untouched beside his phone. The television played the morning news. Former executive Nathan Blake has officially resigned following the publicized assault at the Plaza Hotel. The anchor's voice dripped with polite pity. Sources close to the Carter family confirmed that Emily Carter and her child are safe. He turned off the TV. "Safe," he muttered, the word burning his throat. He picked up a glass and threw it across the room. It shattered, echoing in the emptiness. His mother called that afternoon. "Nathan," she began softly. "I saw the news. What have you done, sweetheart?" He rubbed his forehead. "It's not what it looks like, Mom." Her voice cracked. "It's exactly what it looks like. You hurt your wife. You humiliated your family. I raised you better than this." "Don't start," he snapped. "You don't know the pressure I was under." "No," she said firmly. "I know the difference between stress and cruelty." Then she paused. "You need help, Nathan. Real help. Go to therapy. Fix yourself before it's too late." He hung up before answering. Meanwhile, across the river in Brooklyn, Emily was having breakfast with Grace and Linda. The kitchen smelled like fresh coffee and toast. Noah was in his high chair, giggling at the crumbs on his tray. Linda flipped open her folder. "The court date for the protective order is confirmed for next Friday. Nathan has been notified. We'll present the video evidence from the plaza and the financial statements Miguel uncovered." Grace looked at Emily. "Are you ready for that?" Emily took a breath. "I have to be." For Noah. Richard arrived just then, carrying a small toy airplane. "I thought my grandson might like this," he said, handing it to Noah. The boy clapped and squealed, filling the room with warmth. Richard smiled at his daughter. "You've done well, Emily. You're calmer. Stronger." She looked up from her coffee. "I'm getting there, one day at a time." That night, Emily tucked Noah into bed and sat at her desk. The city lights flickered beyond the window, glowing like embers. She opened her journal and wrote, "Day 11. The noise is fading. The fear is smaller. I can breathe again." Across town, Nathan was spiraling. His phone buzzed with alerts, more articles, more headlines. One of them read, "Blake and Carter stock rebounds after Blake's resignation." He laughed bitterly. "They're better off without me," he muttered. When he went outside for air, paparazzi were waiting. Flashes erupted like lightning. "Nathan, any comment on the abuse allegations?" one shouted. "Will you face criminal charges?" He pushed through them, his voice hoarse. No comment, but inside, guilt was eating him alive. For the first time, he realized the empire he'd built was nothing but glass, and he'd shattered it himself. Later that evening, he sat in the dark, scrolling through old photos. Emily smiling at Central Park, Noah's first birthday. His throat tightened. "What have I done?" he whispered. At that same hour, Emily stood on her balcony, holding her cup of tea. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings. She looked up at the stars just starting to pierce through the clouds. For the first time, the future didn't feel terrifying, it felt open. Grace texted her, "Proud of you. You're winning this, one sunrise at a time." Emily smiled, typing back, "I'm not fighting him anymore. I'm fighting for me." And as the night stretched over Manhattan, two souls faced opposite directions, one drowning in regret, the other finally learning how to breathe again. A week later, the city was wrapped in early winter, light cold, crisp, and quiet. Emily bundled Noah into his stroller, wrapping a blue blanket around him before stepping out into the morning air. The walk along Brooklyn Heights Promenade had become their new ritual. From there, she could see Manhattan's skyline rising like a reminder. The world could break you, but it could also make you start over. She stopped at a small cafe on the corner, the kind with steamed-up windows and the smell of roasted beans drifting outside. The barista recognized her now. "Good morning, Miss Carter. Usual latte?" "Yes, please," she said, smiling faintly. It was the first time she'd smiled without forcing it. She sat near the window, sipping her coffee, while Noah gurgled happily beside her. Across the street, the world moved on, people rushing to offices, taxis honking, a man carrying a stack of Amazon boxes. Life didn't pause for anyone's heartbreak, she realized. It just flowed, indifferent but steady. Grace joined her 10 minutes later, cheeks pink from the cold. "You're up early," she teased, sliding into the seat opposite. "I couldn't sleep," Emily admitted. "I kept thinking about Friday, the hearing." Grace reached for her hand. "You've done everything right, Em. You have evidence, witnesses, your dad's support. You'll be fine." Emily nodded, though her stomach twisted. "I don't want to see him." "You might not have to," Grace said. Linda said they might handle it mostly through counsel. Emily took a deep breath. "Good. I don't know what I'd say if I did." Later that afternoon, Linda called with updates. Her voice was calm, professional, as always. "The restraining order remains in effect. Nathan's team requested a mediation meeting instead of a full confrontation. We'll consider it, but only on your terms." "My terms?" Emily repeated softly. "Yes," Linda said. "You decide what happens next. That's the difference between surviving and taking control." After the call, Emily stood by the window, watching the sun sink behind Manhattan's towers. The sky turned shades of pink and gold, reflecting off the water. She realized she didn't hate Nathan anymore. Hatred meant he still had space in her heart, and she was done giving him that. That evening, Richard stopped by after work, carrying takeout. "You're eating, right?" he asked, pretending to sound casual. "Trying to," Emily said with a small laugh. They ate together at the kitchen counter. Richard looked around the apartment. "You know," he said, "this place suits you. It's peaceful." "It's not home yet," she admitted, "but it's getting there." He nodded slowly. "When your mother passed, I thought peace would never come back, but it does. It just takes time and the right people." Emily reached across the counter, touching his hand. "Thanks, Dad, for everything." "Always," he said, his eyes softening. Later that night, after Noah had fallen asleep, Emily opened her journal again. The pages were filling quickly now, small victories, honest reflections, fragments of hope. She wrote, "Day 12. I walked without fear today. I laughed without guilt. Maybe healing isn't a straight line. Maybe it's a circle coming back to yourself piece by piece." She closed the notebook and stepped out onto the balcony. The air was sharp, but refreshing. Across the river, Manhattan glittered, like a memory she no longer needed to chase. Somewhere in that maze of glass and light, Nathan was probably unraveling, but that wasn't her story anymore. Emily whispered to the wind, "We're okay now." She pressed a kiss to Noah's forehead and turned off the lights. The apartment fell into a soft silence, warm and safe. And as she drifted to sleep, Emily realized that peace wasn't something you found in others. It was something you built quietly, breath by breath, after surviving your own storm. Snow was falling over Manhattan like powdered glass, blanketing the streets in a thin, fragile peace. In Richard Carter's downtown office, the lights burned late. Miguel Torres sat across from him, scrolling through spreadsheets on his MacBook Pro, the glow from the screen reflecting off his glasses. "I found something," he said quietly. Richard looked up. "Something useful?" Miguel nodded, turning the laptop toward him. "A shell company, Orion Consulting. It's registered in Delaware, no employees, but the payments line up perfectly with Nathan's business trips. Same dates, same amounts. The recipient, Ava Monroe." Richard's jaw tightened. So he was paying her through corporate funds. "Exactly," Miguel said. "The money came from the discretionary marketing budget hidden under public relations consulting." Richard exhaled, his anger measured, controlled. "Document everything. Linda will want this for court." Meanwhile, in Brooklyn Heights, Emily was folding Noah's laundry when her phone buzzed. It was a message from Linda. "We've uncovered new financial evidence, misappropriation of company funds involving Nathan and Ava. This strengthens both custody and divorce proceedings." Emily stared at the screen for a long moment. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from validation. "So, the truth is finally surfacing," she whispered. Grace stopped by that afternoon, carrying groceries and gossip in equal measure. "You're not going to believe this," she said, kicking off her boots. "Someone spotted Ava at a PR event last night without Nathan. Apparently she's pitching herself as a crisis management expert. Can you believe that? The nerve." Emily laughed softly for the first time in weeks. "I guess people like her always land on their feet. At least for a while." Grace poured them coffee and sat at the counter. "You okay?" "I think so," Emily said. "It hurts less now. Not because it's over, but because I finally know who they are." "Truth is freedom," Grace said simply. That evening, Richard stopped by with Linda and Miguel. They spread documents across the dining table, the city lights from across the river flickering behind them. Linda tapped the papers. "This is enough to file a secondary claim fraud and misuse of assets. Nathan can't hide behind his resignation anymore. The board will pursue him legally, and we'll attach those claims to your divorce. It ensures full transparency in asset division." Emily nodded slowly. "I don't want his money. I just want peace." Linda smiled. "You're not asking for vengeance. You're asking for fairness. That's what makes you powerful." As they worked, Noah woke up briefly, crying from a nightmare. Emily excused herself, rocking him gently in her arms until he calmed. Through the soft hum of the city and the murmurs of voices in the next room, she felt something shift again. Strength didn't roar, it whispered through quiet choices, through standing tall when no one was watching. Later, after everyone left, Richard lingered by the door. "You've handled this with grace. I didn't think possible," he said. Emily smiled faintly. "I had a good teacher." He hesitated. "Nathan called me this morning, wanted to talk. I didn't answer." "You shouldn't," she said gently. "He needs to face this alone." Richard nodded. "I agree." After he left, Emily sat by the window, looking out at the city she was slowly reclaiming. The bridges glowed under the snow, connecting two worlds, her old life and her new one. She opened her voice memo app again. "Day 13, she whispered. "The lies are untangling. Every wire he tried to hide is coming to light. I used to think the truth would destroy me. Now I see it's what's saving me." She glanced at Noah sleeping peacefully and smiled. And as the snow fell quietly over Manhattan, Emily understood that sometimes the most powerful revenge wasn't anger or chaos, it was letting the truth dismantle the lies, piece by piece, until nothing false remained standing. The evening air over Brooklyn was heavy with mist, the kind that blurred the lights of the bridge into watercolor streaks. At the River Cafe, a place that glowed like a secret under the shadow of the Brooklyn Bridge, Richard Carter waited at a corner table. He'd chosen it for a reason: quiet, discreet, and poetic enough for a reckoning. He checked his Mont Blanc watch. 7:30. Nathan was late. Typical. Richard's hands rested on the table, still as stone. Around him, the soft clinking of silverware and the low murmur of conversation created an atmosphere almost too peaceful for what was coming. Finally, the door opened. Nathan entered wearing a gray coat and exhaustion. His once polished presence was replaced by something hollow. He spotted Richard and approached, avoiding the waiter's eyes. "Thank you for seeing me," Nathan said, his voice low, almost hesitant. Richard didn't stand. "Sit," Nathan obeyed, folding his hands. "I didn't know where else to go. Everyone's turned against me. The company, the board. My name's garbage in every newspaper." "That's because you turned it into garbage," Richard said evenly. "Don't pretend you're the victim here." Nathan's face twitched. "I made mistakes, yes. But I didn't mean for it to go this far. I loved Emily, you know that." Richard's gaze hardened. "You loved power. You loved how she made you look. That's not love, it's vanity." Nathan swallowed, his voice trembling. "I don't know what to say anymore." "Then don't say anything," Richard replied. He took out a folded document and placed it on the table. "This is what happens next. You'll comply with the financial audit and the court's custody order. You'll complete an anger management and domestic violence rehabilitation program. You'll have supervised visitation rights with Noah until the court decides otherwise. Nathan stared at the paper as though it were a sentence. And if I refuse? Richard leaned forward, his tone calm but lethal. Then I'll make sure you never work in this city again. You'll be remembered as the man who destroyed himself and lost everything. You won't even be able to get a desk job on Wall Street. Nathan's voice broke. Richard, I'm begging you. Please. I just want a chance to fix this. Richard paused, studying him for a long, uncomfortable silence. Do you know what real fixing looks like? It's not grand gestures. It's accountability. It's waking up every day and living with what you did. It's doing better without expecting applause. The waiter arrived quietly with 2 glasses of water, sensing the tension. Nathan didn't touch his. He looked out the window toward the shimmering East River. I don't even know who I am anymore, he whispered. Richard's expression softened just slightly. That's the first honest thing you've said in months. Maybe start there. Nathan nodded weakly, tears pricking his eyes. I'll sign whatever you want. Good, Richard said. He stood, buttoning his coat. And Nathan, stay away from Ava. She's under investigation, and she'll drag you down further if you let her. Nathan's jaw clenched. She already did. Richard left money on the table, then turned to go. But before walking away, he paused at Nathan's side. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I don't hate you. I pity you. Because a man who can't protect what's good in his life doesn't deserve to keep it. Nathan didn't answer. He just sat there, staring at his reflection in the water, distorted by the ripples of passing ferries. Outside, Richard stepped into the cold night. He inhaled deeply, watching the city lights shimmer across the river. Somewhere in Brooklyn Heights, Emily was reading Noah a bedtime story, her laughter gentle and sure. And as Richard walked toward his car, he felt a calm certainty justice wasn't loud, and it didn't need applause. It arrived quietly, like the tide, washing away everything that didn't belong. The snow along the Brooklyn streets had turned into soft slush, glittering under the city lights. Emily adjusted her scarf as she carried Noah in her arms, his little mittened hand clutching her coat. She stopped in front of a modest brick building with a glass door that read, Harbor Women's Health Collective. The smell of disinfectant and warm coffee greeted her as she stepped inside. It wasn't glamorous like her old office on Park Avenue, but there was something comforting about the place, honest, human, alive. Inside, women moved briskly through the halls. The clinic director, Dr. Helena Morris, looked up from her desk and smiled. Emily Carter? Yes, Emily said, smiling shyly. We're glad you're here. Your background in prenatal care is exactly what we need. Come, I'll show you around. They walked through bright hallways filled with laughter, children's drawings, and the hum of steady work. Emily could feel a spark flicker inside her, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in months. Dr. Morris stopped at a small office with a window facing the river. This could be yours, she said. We believe in second chances here. For patients and for ourselves. Emily's eyes welled up. Thank you. You have no idea how much this means. Actually, Dr. Morris replied gently, I think I do. Later that afternoon, Emily sat at her new desk, unpacking a small box of things, a framed photo of Noah, a worn-out stethoscope, and her old notebook filled with handwritten affirmations. She glanced at one page that read, Strength doesn't mean never breaking. It means rebuilding after you do. Just then, Grace burst through the door with her signature grin. Well, look at you, Dr. Carter, back in business. Emily laughed. Not quite. More like a beginner again. Same thing, Grace said, setting down a Starbucks coffee. Beginners make the best comebacks. As they talked, Noah toddled around the room, bumping into the desk with giggles. The sound filled the air with warmth. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily wasn't looking backward. She was building forward. That evening, Richard stopped by to drop off some paperwork. He stood in the doorway, taking in the sight of his daughter in her white coat, typing on her computer with focus. You look like yourself again, he said softly. Emily smiled. Maybe for the first time, Dad. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a small note in his handwriting. "Proud of you. Always, Dad." She blinked back tears. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he interrupted gently. "Because you did what most people never do. You turned pain into something useful." After he left, Emily closed up the clinic, stepping out into the early evening. The city skyline shimmered across the river like a dream she'd stopped chasing. Now it was simply their background, not the center. At the corner, she noticed a man struggling to carry boxes into a nearby building. Without thinking, she hurried over to help. "Here, let me get the door." The man turned, smiling gratefully. He was tall, with kind eyes and sleeves rolled up against the cold. "Thanks," he said. "You saved me a disaster." "No problem," Emily replied, setting down a box labeled medical supplies. He laughed. "I'm Daniel Hayes, volunteer coordinator. You must be Emily." She blinked in surprise. "You know me? Dr. Morris talks about you like you're a miracle worker." Emily chuckled, shaking his hand. "Hardly. Just trying to keep my balance." Daniel smiled. "Well, you seem to be doing a pretty good job." They shared a quiet laugh, and for a brief moment, Emily felt something light flicker in her chest. Not love, not yet, but the soft hum of possibility. That night, she carried Noah up the stairs, his head resting on her shoulder. She whispered, "Mommy's starting over, baby. And this time, we're going to build something real." And as she turned off the lights, Emily didn't see the ghost of her past anymore, only the warm glow of a future waiting patiently to be lived. The Manhattan skyline glimmered beneath a gray sky, like glass before a storm. Inside her luxury apartment on the Upper East Side, Ava Monroe sat cross-legged on her couch, typing furiously on her MacBook. The curtains were drawn tight, the air thick with the scent of stale champagne and perfume. Her manicured nails clicked against the keys as she drafted her latest email and official statement to the media. "To whom it may concern," she wrote, "I am the victim of a corporate smear campaign orchestrated by Richard Carter and his daughter Emily Carter. Their goal is to destroy my reputation and cover up their own family scandals." She paused, smirking at her reflection in the black screen. "If I go down," she whispered, "they go with me." Her phone buzzed. It was her publicist. "Ava, don't do this," the woman warned. "They've got too much evidence, financial records, hotel receipts. If you push this, they'll bury you." Ava's smile didn't falter. "Not if I bury them first." Meanwhile, across the river in Brooklyn, Emily was wrapping up her shift at the clinic. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the blinds, warm against her skin. Daniel had dropped by earlier with lunch, 2 turkey sandwiches, and his easy, disarming grin. "You work too hard," he'd said. "Better than thinking too much," Emily had replied with a smile. Now, as she packed her bag, her phone rang. Linda's name flashed on the screen. "Emily, you need to see this. Don't panic, but Ava's gone public." Emily froze. "Public? About what?" "She's accusing you and your father of defamation and professional sabotage. She sent a press release to the New York Ledger and half a dozen other outlets. She's claiming she's the real victim, that Nathan was manipulated by your family." Emily sank into her chair. "She's unbelievable." Linda sighed. "We expected this. Don't worry, we have documentation to shut this down. But be prepared. The headlines will sting for a few days." By evening, the internet was buzzing. "Ava Monroe speaks. I was framed by the Carters." "New twist in the Blake scandal. Who's really guilty?" Grace called within minutes. Don't read the comments. Seriously, don't." But Emily already had. Anonymous users, tabloids, gossip accounts, they all speculated. Some pitied Ava, some defended Emily. Others called it rich people drama. Emily closed her laptop, heart pounding. Why does she keep doing this? Isn't destroying my marriage enough? Richard arrived soon after, his face grim. "We'll handle this," he said. Linda's preparing a counterstatement with factual proof. "Ava's gambling on sympathy. She's desperate. She's dangerous," Emily whispered. "She has nothing left to lose." Across the city, Ava poured herself another glass of wine and stared at her reflection. Her eyes were red, makeup smudged, but her pride was intact for now. She whispered into the empty room, "You think you can erase me? Watch me rise again." But when she refreshed her inbox, a new email appeared from an anonymous sender. Subject: legal notice, pending investigation. Body: Miss Monroe, your name has been included in a financial misconduct review by Blake and Carter Holdings. Please prepare to submit to inquiry. Her hand froze midair. "What?" she muttered. Reading it again, she scrolled further. Attached were copies of hotel invoices, bank transfers, and signed expense reports with her name printed clearly at the bottom. For the first time, her smirk faded. Back in Brooklyn, Linda called again, her tone almost amused. "Looks like the storm's over before it started." The board released their internal findings. Ava's implicated in Nathan's fraud case. She'll be too busy defending herself to attack anyone else. Emily sank back into the couch, exhaling slowly. "For her, yes," Linda said. "For you, it's just beginning." The rebuilding part. Later that night, Emily stood by the window, looking out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. Noah slept peacefully in his crib, the soft rise and fall of his chest anchoring her. And as snow began to fall again, Emily realized something profound. The past could scream all it wanted, but it no longer had power over the woman who had learned to answer it with silence. The courthouse stood tall and gray against the winter sky, its marble steps glistening with a thin layer of ice. Emily stood at the base of them, holding her breath, one hand resting protectively on her growing belly. Her father stood beside her, coat buttoned tight, eyes steady. "You're not walking into a fight," Richard said softly. "You're walking into freedom." She nodded, her heart thudding in her chest. Noah was home with Grace, who'd texted minutes earlier. "You've got this, Em. Remember who you are." Inside, the corridors smelled of old paper and polished wood. The sound of footsteps and murmured voices filled the air. Linda met her halfway to the courtroom, a file tucked under her arm. "He's here," she said quietly. Nathan arrived early. "Looks different." Emily's stomach twisted. "Different how?" "Broken," Linda replied simply. When they entered, Nathan was already seated at the respondent's table. His hair was shorter, his suit plain, his expression heavy. The arrogance that once clung to him was gone, replaced by exhaustion. For a brief moment, Emily almost didn't recognize him. The judge entered, and everyone rose. The gavel struck. Case 4180, 2 Carter versus Blake. Linda began with calm precision, her voice firm but measured. She presented the evidence: security footage from the plaza, financial records proving Nathan's misuse of corporate funds, witness statements, and medical documentation of Emily's injuries. Each piece of paper landed like a quiet hammer on the table. Nathan's attorney, a man with an expensive tie and no soul in his eyes, tried to interrupt. "Your Honor, my client deeply regrets." The judge raised a hand. "Regret doesn't erase evidence, Counselor." When it was Nathan's turn to speak, he stood slowly. His voice was low, cracked. "Your Honor, I can't defend what I did. There's no excuse. I was angry, stressed, and I took it out on the one person who believed in me. I've lost everything because of that moment, and I deserve to." He paused, glancing at Emily, his eyes glassy. "But please, I just want to see my son." Emily's heart clenched. He sounded human again, but the memory of that night, the slap, the shame, the fear, all came rushing back. She looked down at her hands, steadying her breath. Linda rose. "Your Honor, my client is not opposed to Nathan Blake being part of Noah's life, but only under the conditions of safety and accountability. Supervised visitation, continued therapy, and completion of anger management are non-negotiable." The judge nodded thoughtfully, flipping through the documents. "Given the evidence and both parties' statements, this court rules as follows. Full custody to the mother, Emily Carter. The father, Nathan Blake, is granted supervised visitation twice a month, contingent upon documented progress in his rehabilitation program." A hush fell over the courtroom. The gavel struck once more. Court adjourned. Nathan stood still, eyes fixed on the floor. Emily felt her knees weaken, a flood of emotion rising: relief, sorrow, closure. She gathered her papers, but before leaving, she turned to him. For a moment, their eyes met. He whispered, barely audible, "I'm sorry." She nodded softly. "I know." And then she walked away. Outside, the air was biting cold, but Emily felt lighter than she had in years. Reporters gathered near the steps, cameras flashing. Linda guided her past them, shielding her from questions. Richard waited by the car, his proud, steady smile breaking through the winter gloom. He opened the door for her. "It's over," he said quietly. Emily looked back at the courthouse, then up at the pale blue sky. "No," she whispered. "It's just beginning." Later, as they drove home, she gazed out at the Manhattan skyline in the distance, no longer intimidating, just beautiful. She thought of Noah, of the clinic, of the life she was rebuilding piece by piece. And as the city lights flickered in the fading daylight, Emily realized that justice wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming her peace, her power, and her name. The first hints of spring began to thaw the last traces of winter. In Brooklyn Heights, sunlight spilled through the windows of Emily's apartment, turning the walls golden. She sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee from her favorite mug, while Noah scribbled on a coloring book beside her. His laughter filled the room like music. For the first time in months, the air felt light-free. Her phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Morris. "Congratulations. Your position as assistant director is official. You start Monday." Emily smiled, staring at the screen. Assistant director. It wasn't just a promotion, it was proof that she'd rebuilt something solid from the ashes of her past. She leaned down, kissed Noah's forehead, and whispered, "Mommy did it." Later that day, she stopped by the clinic. The halls were buzzing with activity, patients chatting, nurses laughing, sunlight streaming across white floors. Daniel was at the front desk, talking to a volunteer. When he saw her, his face lit up. "Well, if it isn't our new boss," he teased, handing her a coffee. "How's it feel to be running the show?" Emily laughed. "Terrifying, but good terrifying." He leaned against the counter. "You deserve it, Emily. You've been through hell, and somehow made it look like a training ground." She blushed slightly, glancing down at her cup. "I had a lot of help." Daniel smiled. "Maybe, but you did the hard part yourself." They spent the morning going over new community programs, prenatal workshops, mental health support for single mothers, job placement resources. Emily's ideas flowed effortlessly, her passion returning like it had never left. For every new initiative, she saw a version of herself who once needed exactly that kind of lifeline. At lunch, Daniel joined her on the bench outside the clinic. The city hummed around them, delivery trucks, kids playing, distant subway rumbles. "You know," he said, "I used to think strength meant keeping everything together. But you've shown me it's about knowing when to start over." Emily looked at him, her eyes soft. "Starting over isn't weakness. It's choosing to live again." For a moment, their hands brushed. Neither moved away. Across the river, Nathan sat in a modest apartment, staring at a photo of Noah taped to his fridge. He'd just finished his third counseling session, his therapist reminding him that redemption took more than regret, it took consistency. He wrote Emily an email every week, though he never sent it. Each one began the same. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope I can become someone our son won't be ashamed to know." Back at the clinic, Emily finished her shift and walked to the park with Noah. The cherry blossoms had just begun to bloom, painting the trees with soft pink. She lifted Noah into her arms, spinning him slowly under the falling petals. He giggled, reaching up toward the sky. Richard joined them later, hands tucked in his coat pockets. "You look happy," he said. "I am," Emily replied simply. "For the first time, I really am." He nodded. "Your mother would be proud." They watched the sunset together, the skyline glowing across the river, warm and alive. Daniel arrived a few minutes later, carrying 2 coffees. "Thought you might need this," he said with a grin. Emily accepted it, their fingers brushing again. This time, she didn't pull away. As twilight deepened, she looked around at the people beside her, her father, her son, her new friend, and realized that life had come full circle. Not perfect, but peaceful. Not loud, but strong. Later that night, after putting Noah to bed, she opened her journal and wrote, Day 18. I didn't rebuild my old life. I built a new one. And it's better. She closed the book, turned off the light, and stood by the window, watching the city sparkle. And as the wind carried the scent of spring through the open glass, Emily Carter understood her truth at last. Survival was never the ending. It was the beginning of becoming unstoppable. The morning sun rose over Manhattan like a clean slate. Emily stood by the window of her office at Harbor Women's Health Collective, the skyline glowing beyond the river. Her reflection in the glass looked different now, stronger, calmer. No trace of the woman who had once trembled under the weight of someone else's cruelty. She adjusted her white coat and smiled to herself. Today was important. Linda had called the night before with news. The internal investigation at Blake and Carter Holdings was complete. The results would be made public this morning. The truth, every lie, every dollar misused, was finally coming to light. At 9 a.m., her phone buzzed. A message from Grace popped up. Turn on Channel 7. It's happening. Emily crossed the room, switching on the small TV in the corner. A well-dressed news anchor appeared on screen, standing outside the company's headquarters. Behind her, the logo, Blake and Carter, gleamed faintly in the morning light. After months of internal review, the reporter said, the board of directors has confirmed that former executive Nathan Blake was found guilty of severe financial misconduct, falsifying company expenses, and violating corporate ethics codes. In addition, PR executive Ava Monroe has been charged with conspiracy to defraud and obstruction of investigation. Emily froze, watching the images Nathan being escorted from the building weeks ago, Ava covering her face with oversized sunglasses, reporters shouting questions. The truth wasn't whispered anymore, it was broadcast. Her father, Richard, appeared briefly in the clip, giving a calm, measured statement. No one, regardless of status, is above accountability. Integrity must outlast ambition, Grace called a moment later. Well, that's that, she said. Your dad looks like he just ended an entire generation of corporate egos. Emily laughed softly. He did what he had to do. Correction, Grace said. You all did. Across the city, Nathan sat in a small rented apartment, watching the same report. His coffee had gone cold. He looked smaller somehow, his arrogance stripped away. When the anchor read his name aloud, he closed his eyes. Yeah, he muttered to himself. I earned that. He turned off the TV and opened his laptop. There was a draft email addressed to Emily, unsent like all the others. But this time, he started typing again. Emily, I know an apology doesn't fix what I did. I don't expect it to. But I've been attending every session, doing every exercise they ask. I think about Noah every day. I hope someday I can prove I'm not the man you saw that night. Nathan, he didn't send it, but he didn't delete it either. For once, he just sat quietly and let the truth sting. Back in Brooklyn, the clinic was buzzing. Patients congratulated Emily on her promotion, unaware of how deeply the headlines tied to her name. Daniel walked in, holding 2 lattes. Thought you might need caffeine for the victory lap, he said. Emily smiled. It's not a victory, she replied gently. It's justice. There's a difference. He nodded, admiring her calm. You really did it, you know. You didn't just survive, you turned the whole thing into something bigger. She took a sip of her coffee and looked out the window. I think that's what healing really is, she said softly. Turning the worst moments into lessons for someone else's beginning. That evening, she closed the clinic early and took Noah for a walk along the promenade. The sky was streaked with orange and lavender, the river shimmering below. Her father met them halfway, his coat unbuttoned against the mild breeze. He handed her a small envelope. The board finalized everything, he said. You've been granted full ownership of your shares. It's in your name now. Emily blinked, stunned. Dad, I don't need that. Richard smiled. You don't, but you earned it. She hugged him tightly, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. For the first time, the world didn't feel heavy, it felt wide open. And as Manhattan glowed under the setting sun, Emily Carter realized that the truth didn't just set her free, it built the foundation of the life she was always meant to live. The Plaza Hotel shimmered again under golden chandeliers, its ballroom filled with the soft hum of conversation and the clink of crystal glasses. For many, it was just another charity gala. For Emily Carter, it was a full circle. The place where her life had once broken was now the stage of her triumph. She stood near the grand staircase, wearing a sleek, ivory gown that caught the light like silk in motion. Her hair was swept up, a single diamond pendant glinting at her throat. Every step, every breath carried quiet power. Tonight's event was for the Women Rising Initiative, a partnership between her clinic and the Carter Foundation, funding healthcare access for single mothers. "Emily," a voice called warmly. It was Grace, radiant in emerald green. "You're trending on social media again, but for all the right reasons. The woman who turned pain into power." Emily laughed, shaking her head. "Let's hope the views turn into donations." Richard approached, proud and composed, his tuxedo perfectly tailored. "You look exactly like your mother did the night we built this company," he said softly, "only stronger." Emily touched his arm, smiling. "You taught me how to stand up straight again." They moved toward the center of the ballroom as the lights dimmed. The MC's voice echoed, "Please welcome our keynote speaker, Miss Emily Carter." Applause filled the room. Emily took a steady breath, walking to the podium. Cameras flashed, but she didn't flinch. "2 years ago," she began, "I stood in this very hotel, believing my life had ended. I was wrong. It had only just begun." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. "Pain doesn't destroy us, it reveals who we are beneath everything we thought we needed. I learned that strength isn't about revenge or control, it's about peace. It's about knowing your worth, even when someone tries to take it from you." She looked toward the back of the room, where Daniel stood, smiling proudly. His quiet support had become a constant, never demanding, never saving her, just standing beside her. Emily continued, her voice steady but full of feeling. "Every woman deserves safety, dignity, and the chance to rebuild. That's why we're here, to make sure no one faces what I faced alone." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, tears glistened on faces. Somewhere among the guests, a young mother held her baby and whispered, "Thank you." When the speech ended, Richard embraced her tightly. "You did it," he said. "No," Emily replied with a smile, looking around the room filled with survivors, donors, and supporters. "We did it." Later, as the music swelled and couples began to dance, Daniel approached her with 2 glasses of champagne. "For the record," he said, "you owned that stage." She laughed softly. "I wasn't performing. I was finally telling the truth." He clinked his glass against hers. "To truth, then." "To starting over," she replied. They danced slowly under the same chandeliers that once illuminated her pain. But tonight, the light felt different, warmer, gentler. Noah, now 2 years old, toddled around with Grace nearby, giggling as he tried to catch the reflections of the crystals on the floor. For a moment, Emily closed her eyes and breathed in the sound of laughter, music, and peace. She thought of the journey of fear turned to courage, of betrayal turned to purpose. The slap that once echoed through this very hall had become just another note in a symphony of redemption. Outside, the Manhattan skyline sparkled like a promise. The wind off Central Park carried the faint scent of spring. As she stood at the balcony later that night, Daniel beside her, she whispered, "This is the life I was meant to have." He smiled, "And it's just beginning." Emily looked up at the stars over Fifth Avenue, her heart steady, her spirit unshaken. The scars remained, but they no longer hurt, they simply told her story. And as the plaza glowed behind her, Emily Carter, the woman once broken before the world, finally stood whole, radiant, and free, proving that true victory isn't about what you win back, but what you build when no one believes you can. So, that's how Emily's story ends. But if you're still here, watching and listening all the way until now, then maybe, just maybe, something in her journey touched your heart too. Because we've all been there, haven't we? Broken, doubting, wondering if we'll ever stand again. Emily's story isn't just about pain, it's about rebirth. It's about realizing that healing isn't loud. It's quiet, patient, and deeply personal. There's a line from Marcus Aurelius that says, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's exactly what Emily learned, what we all can learn. We can't control who hurts us, but we can choose what we become after the hurt. Healing is an act of defiance. It's saying, "You didn't end me, you refined me." So tonight, if you're standing in your own storm, remember, the pain isn't your ending, it's your transformation. If Emily's story made you feel something, hope, courage, even a single spark of strength, then hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs it, and subscribe to our channel. Because together, we'll keep telling stories that remind us, no matter how dark it gets, we can always choose to rise again.